Welcome to the Brittany Hughes Show. Happy Thursday, everybody. So millions of Americans who grew up apparently thinking that everything in life should be free are now learning the hard way that it's not, and that when you borrow money and you promise to pay it back, eventually you are going to have to pony up the cash. So the Trump administration's Department of Education this week announced that it's going to start collecting and resuming collections on student loans that have been stalled for the past 5 years. These are loans that were paused during the COVID pandemic back in 2020 and 2021. And the department now says that they're going to resume collections on those loans and that they will even garnish the wages or take payments out of other government benefits for those who refuse to make payments on their debt. So this affects more than about 5 million people who are currently in default on their student loans, which means that it's been more than 270 days since they've made a payment. And there are millions more, of course, who owe student loans to the federal government, and we're going to get to why that is in a minute. But of course, the Biden administration had just tried to kind of wipe these things out, right? No more student loan debt. If you borrowed money and you got the degree, or at least you used the money to go to school, and now you benefit from the education that you got or the degree that is currently hanging on your wall, you purchased the product, but now you can't pay back the money that you borrowed from the American taxpayer. So we're just going to wipe the slate clean and forgive the debt, which doesn't make it go away. It just shifts the burden onto the American taxpayer and makes them suck it up. But here's the Trump administration now. After the Biden administration attempted to wipe out student loan debt to the tune of billions of dollars, and the courts had to come in and say, no, actually, you can't do that. And then he kept trying and trying and trying again, because again, this is a political football that is now being passed around. And the Trump administration comes in, not being total morons and taking the far more fair and just approach and saying, look, no, wait a second. You borrowed this money. You promised to pay it back. You signed on the dotted line. You've had 5 years of reprieve, by the way, from having to make payments, which frankly is far more than you should have gotten for a pandemic that ended about 4 years ago. And now you're going to have to start paying your bill, because that's what you do when you owe money, whether it's your car payment, whether it's medical bills, whatever it is that you have taken out. That's what you do when you owe a debt. That's life. The department said that people who are struggling to make their payments can do several things. They can contact the student aid office and their default resolution group to make a monthly payment. They can enroll in an income-driven payment plan, or they can sign up for loan rehabilitation. So there are a few ways to slice this apple, but whichever way you choose to do it, you're going to have to make good on your promise to pay back this debt that you voluntarily took out, that you chose to take out, and there are several options available to you to do that. And if you don't, the government may garnish your paycheck or take that money out of other benefits that you might receive. Because again, that's what happens when you owe a debt that you refuse to pay. That's why we have collections agencies. If you don't pay your light bill, if you don't pay your child support, if you don't make your car payment, whatever, they can either repossess your vehicle, they can either take back what you purchased with that money, or they can start to garnish your wages. They can find other means of collecting it from you. Again, all of this stuff is standard. None of this stuff is new. This is life. This is what happens in the big boy world. This is what happens when you put on your adult pants and you come out of being a child and you take responsibility for your own choices and your own actions, which apparently is a foreign concept to millions of people in this country. The wacky idea that a person actually be required to pay back money that they willingly borrowed is sending some people into absolute apoplexy, including apparently this young lady who is just beside herself at the notion that anybody would ask her to pay a bill that she owes. Check this out.
The federal government just announced that it's coming for your loans, and collections begin May 5th for student loan debt. If you're in default, they can garnish your wages, they can take your tax return, and they can even take your benefits like Social Security. They are really just trying to absolutely cripple as many people as possible at this point. It's pretty clear they want us completely broke. They don't give a about our health. They don't really give a if we die. Yeah, they're just gonna cut everything. This really just paves the path for so much more.
This woman is saying this like this is some obscene human rights violation. Like she is just clutching her pearls, or would be if she owned pearls. I doubt she does. But I mean, this woman is just acting like this is something that has never before been done in the history of mankind, and this is just such a grotesque evil that is being foisted upon her, like it's a half a step below being, thrown into a concentration camp or something. Look, you are not a victim. You are not a victim for being told that you have to pay back a loan. I am sorry that you gambled on yourself and lost. I am sorry that you signed up for a debt that you are now struggling to repay. There are options available to you when it comes to how to repay this. If you can't pay the bill as you currently owe it, there are restructuring programs that you can look into, that you can apply for, that will help you figure out a way to do this in a way that makes sense for your life. But I'm sorry that the job that you got with the degree that you earned was not worth the money that you borrowed to pay for it. I'm very sorry. That was a poorly placed bet. And it's one that millions of Americans seem to make, thinking that real life was never going to hit, that you weren't ever going to have to make these payments, or that, I don't know, everything was just going to magically go away when you decided that you didn't want to do this anymore. There was another woman who took to TikTok this week to complain that she's now in debt to the federal government, having apparently missed the memo that she was already. This is just the restarting of a loan, payments on a loan that she already owed. The government is just reminding her of it. Your debt still there. And she says she shouldn't have to pay it because she was only 18 when she took out the loan.
But I am now in debt to the U.S. Department of Education. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That was dissolved. I am now in debt to the SBA. That's the Small Business Administration. Don't that sound crazy? I'm in debt to them a whopping $27,554.24. I was 18 when y'all gave that to me. It's a predatory practice. I didn't know my nose from my
All right, now I personally find this one hilarious for several reasons. Okay, reason the first, you are not suddenly in debt to the federal government. You were already in debt to the federal government, i.e. the American taxpayer. You were allowed to pause payments on these loans because of a government-induced pandemic, which is yet another reason why the government's response to what amounted to a bad flu bug was absolutely over the top and asinine and ridiculous, and we're still feeling the poor and negative effects of that to this day. Okay, but your student loan payments were paused because so many people had lost their jobs thanks to these forced government shutdowns. By the way, you could have kept making payments if you were in a position to do so. It wasn't like the government said, we're just not going to accept your student loan payments right now. You could have kept making payments. In fact, it would have paid down your principal if you had done so, because the student loan interest was also paused during all of this. So it wasn't like your loan was sitting there just accruing interest while you were being banned from making payments. That's not what happened here. The smart thing to do, and I know a lot of people who did do this, would have been to take advantage of the pause in interest and keep making payments so that you pay down your principal. But a lot of people understandably could not do that in 2020 and 2021 because they had lost their job or their business or whatever thanks to these forced government shutdowns. So it makes sense. If the government tells you that you're not allowed to work and we're going to forcibly shut down your place of employment and you don't have money, we're not going to then make you continue to pay on a loan that you owe us while you don't have any income. That made perfect sense at the time, right? Or at least it would have if government shutdowns had made sense in the first place. But that's what happened, so that made sense. But that was 4 and 5 years ago at this point. You were already in debt to the government. This is not some debt that you did not previously owe that's just suddenly cropping up now. You're not an unsuspecting victim in all of this. Secondly, and I do find this interesting, leftists would have you believe that toddlers are introspective enough and wise enough and knowledgeable enough to know their own gender, to understand, what anatomical parts they should and should not have or what they are comfortable with, to understand the complexities of human sexuality, that they can, navigate all of that and decide for themselves whether they want to start things like body-altering chemicals and puberty blockers. They're smart enough to understand and to accept the long-term risks of those things, long-term risks of the natural, the stalling of the natural biological development of their own bodies, which of course can include things like permanent sterility and the loss of bone density. Toddlers can understand all of this, all right? Leftists want you to trust 5-year-olds who still wet the bed and are still learning how to, hold a pencil properly, to be able to do this. But if you want a pass on tens of thousands of dollars worth of loans that you owe the American taxpayer who backed you borrowing it because you were only 18 years old when you signed up for them and you couldn't have possibly known any better, is that what we're saying here? Is that what we're saying here? Because that's absolutely asinine. That is a self-defeating argument. If young people can be smart enough to understand the complexities of gender and sexuality enough to tell you what they are and that they were born in the wrong body and that they want to stall the natural development of their body, and they're only 5, 6, 7 years old, but an 18-year-old isn't smart enough to understand student loan debt and what that's going to saddle them with for years to come. And by the by, as somebody who went to college, okay, and as somebody who graduated from the public school system before that, and as someone who took out student loans and paid them back, I'm telling you right now, if you're saying that an 18-year-old is not financially literate enough to understand what it means to take out tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt with interest, which I do agree, many of them, unfortunately, are not. Frankly, that is a scathing indictment of the American education system that leftists are currently falling all over themselves to defend. I mean, if 13 years of a taxpayer-funded public education does not equip you with the basic intellectual ability to look at a $50,000 a year school and think to yourself, gosh, maybe that's too expensive for a degree in philosophy, then it's not a system worth funding to the tune of billions of taxpayer dollars every year, frankly. It's not doing us a whole lot of good if it's churning out people that are that ignorant. You can't have it both ways. The truth of the matter is, you are a grown adult. You are a grown adult. If you took out a Ferrari's worth of student loan debt to pay for a degree that at best would net you an average job, that's on you. And possibly the people around you who should have raised you better. Like this dude who whined that his mother forced him to take out this student loan and saying that the boomers should have to pay back their kids' debt.
Well, let me tell you something. I didn't borrow a dime. I was 17 years old. My mother forced me to take out that loan, and if I didn't, she was going to throw me out and make me homeless. So I'm not alone in this. I know that many, many children were put in the same situation, and the solution's simple. We should not have our wages garnished. The boomers should have their retirement accounts and social security checks garnished for forcing college onto us, forcing us to take unsustainable loans. It's just screwed up. Student loan forgiveness is the only ethical choice, and the boomers aren't going to give it to us, so we need to go after their money.
Okay, so first of all, if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, I highly recommend that you go over to YouTube and watch the video to get the full effect of this, because I'm telling you, this guy reeks of patchouli and bad weed so strongly you can practically smell it through your phone screen. I mean, honestly, sometimes you can just look at a person and just tell by their, haircut and their very vacant expression of stupidity that, of course, they're going to blame everybody else for their problems. It's like, I don't know, is there like a Seattle factory or something that just churns these people out? Like Ken dolls or something? If Ken were a gender-obsessed loser just sitting in his mama's basement binging old Bernie Sanders speeches and fermenting kombucha. I don't know. I don't know this dude or his mama, and I don't care to. Sounds like they have a less than stellar relationship. Probably makes for some awkward Christmases or, Saturnalias or whatever the heck they celebrate. But if you've got some beef with your mom over student loans that you took out because she told you that you had to go to college or whatever, that's unfortunate. That also sounds like a you problem. That does not sound like a me problem. That does not sound like a problem for, Dan, the certified electrician who now has to foot the bill for your student loans that you're not paying back. That's not the problem of the American taxpayer. That's not the problem of somebody who didn't go to college because they decided that that wasn't a smart idea for them and who went and instead worked their tail off while you were taking out God only knows how much money for a degree in astrology or whatever, because I guarantee you bro did not study engineering. But as far as the debt holder, i.e. the rest of us are concerned, your family problems are not our problems. Whatever issue you've got with your mom has nothing to do with the fact that your signature is on these loan documents and you're standing there holding the degree that you got with somebody else's money. There seems to be some confusion here about what the word loan means, with a whole bunch of ignorant people thinking that it simply refers to free money. Just free money, like it was owed to you by virtue of the fact that you existed and wanted something. But that is not how the world works, cupcake. All right. Student loans are debts that a person voluntarily takes out in order to go to school. The fact that you chose to attend a $200,000 a year college and live it up for 4 years only to realize that you couldn't pay it back with a $35,000 a year job you got with your degree in underwater basket weaving or whatever is not the fault of the American taxpayers, many of whom did not go to college and who loaned you the cash through no willing participation of their own. Okay. And by the way, I kind of want to know how many of the people who found themselves eyeball deep in student loan debt did so by doing this in the smartest way possible. I want to find out how many people who are in student loan debt that they cannot currently pay off went to a 2-year college for the first 2 years of their education and got their associate's degree for much cheaper than if they had started at a 4-year school. I want to know how many economically chose a school that they could afford using the minimal student loans possible rather than just picking a school that they wanted to go to because they liked the campus life or wanted to join a particular sorority or live a certain lifestyle for 4 years because college is cool and fun and that's what you're supposed to do. I want to know how many people chose a major based specifically on the kind of job that they were going to be able to get outside of college that was going to pay them enough not only to pay back their student loans, but to have a good life moving forward, rather than just picking a field of study that they thought was interesting, regardless and with no thought to the job that they could get after college. I want to know how many people went into school with some forethought and a strategy and still found themselves eyeball deep in debt. I'm willing to wager probably not that many. The people that found themselves with $40, $50, $80, $100,000 worth of student loan debt are not the people who did this strategically. They are the people who made poor choices and who now expect everybody else to fund their poor choices. That's who ended up in this situation. And make no mistake, this was a choice. And defaulting on your loan does not make it go away. It simply shifts the burden of paying your bill to those taxpayers. And by extension, of course, the federal government, which has already racked up $37 trillion in debt. And by the way, when I say that it shifts it onto the taxpayers, I don't mean that I expect to get a bill in the mail saying, well, you now owe $500 a month to fund Katie's degree in marine biology or whatever. That's not what I mean. I mean that our generation and the next generation and generations to come are going to be crippled by this debt that keeps compounding. We're in this mess as a nation largely by making asinine financial decisions, of which we cannot afford more. Because, by the way, again, when we forgive student loan debt or medical debt or whatever else that it is that leftists think we should just give people for free, like some Oprah's Favorite Things episode, all of that increases our national debt, which comes back to kick our children and our children's children square in the freaking teeth. It might not mean anything to some childless hippie who is, against procreation because you think the planet is going to explode or because you don't want to care about anything other than yourself, but it matters a great deal to me. And it matters a great deal to the millions of Americans, the tens of millions of Americans with children and with grandchildren who, have the future of this country to think about because we're still invested in it. You don't get to screw over my kids and my grandkids for generations to come because you wanted to go to the premier emporium of intellectual. That's not how this works, so shuck it out, sweethearts. And while you're fishing around in your organic wallet made out of woven hemp and hippie hair, I will use the music degree that I was smart enough not to get and play you a tune on the world's smallest violin because I don't think it's right to saddle plumbers with your debt just because you made a dumb choice. Sorry. And look, I'm all for rehabbing the student loan process and for reforming that, especially if the backers of the loans are going to be the American taxpayers who are assuming the risk of all of these people defaulting on their debt. By the way, which is all entirely thanks to Barack Obama, because in 2010, Obama eliminated the federal guaranteed loan program, which allowed private lenders to offer student loans at very low interest rates that were backed by the federal government. That was a Bush era thing, Bush the first, not the second. But Obama did away with that program and cut out the middleman and said, now you have to go to the Department of Education directly for those loans that now come with anywhere from 6 to more than 9% interest rates. And he sold this by claiming that it was going to save the government money. Again, you're cutting out the middleman, the private lenders, right? Why pay money to back loans by private lenders if you could just lend the money yourself and make a profit off of it, right? Except that in, typical fashion, just about anything that the private sector can do, the government does far more poorly. So now the government hands out these loans directly at higher interest rates. The fact that, people could go sign up for gobs of debt from the feds just encouraged colleges and universities to increase their prices. In 2010, the average in-state cost for a 4-year bachelor's degree at a public school was about $6,000. In 2024, it was almost $12,000. And that's not with room and board. If you're living on campus in 2010, that would have cost you about $21,000 a year. Today, it's about $32,000. That's a $44,000 price difference, assuming that you finish your degree in 4 years. And that's if you're going to an in-state public university. If you're going to a 4-year private school, right now, you're going to pay between about $56,000 and $64,000 per year on average, per year. And you're taking out federal student loans for that. So the cost of college and university tuition absolutely exploded after the Obama administration federalized the student loan program. Students are now graduating college with an average of $35,000 in debt, up from about $17,000 when Obama took over the student loan program in 2010. So that's about, now currently there are about $1.8 trillion currently held in student loan debt in this country, of which $1.7 trillion, so about 93%, is held by the federal government, you and me, our kids, our grandkids. This is not sustainable. Okay, because even if forgiving student loan debt were feasible and smart, which it is not, but even if we could do it, it's not going to lead to any substantial change if we forgive people's debt today and then people just continue to take out these same loans in the future and the whole thing just snowballs again. What are we going to do? Write off everybody's debt every 10 years? How does that work? And all that's going to do is incentivize people to take out money that they know they're not going to be able to pay back because they are expecting it to be forgiven at some point in the future. That is a continual repeated cycle. So yes, I agree something needs to change. And here's, by the way, where I think we can start. I am personally of the belief, and I think that this is a good first step towards a solution in this mess. I am personally of the belief that the amount that you should get to take out in student loans should not be tied at all to the school that you choose to attend. It should be tied to the degree that you plan to earn. You should not just be able to show up with your driver's license and your college acceptance letter and say, hey, I want to go to this school and I make like $200 a week as a part-time babysitter, so I'll be needing $80,000 at a 7% interest rate, please. And then you go off and you get a degree in art history to become a tour guide making $40,000 a year. I don't think you should be able to do that. The amount of risk that a lender is taking on and the likelihood of a person defaulting on this loan that they can't pay back, it is directly tied to the kind of degree that you're getting and the kind of job that it will help you land. If you're pre-med, if you're getting a degree in some tech field, or you're working towards a career that does necessitate a degree, but you're going to be raking in $150,000, $200,000 a year, okay, maybe you qualify for a larger loan, so long as you're still staying on that path. But if you've declared a major in Elizabethan drama, no, I'm not letting you borrow tens of thousands of dollars in student loans, knowing full well that you are going to graduate and find a job as the night manager of a gas station because you can do next to nothing with your useless degree. Absolutely not. I mean, honestly, I don't know if you have ever looked it up, but there are some ridiculous degrees out there that you can take out tens of thousands of dollars in student loans for. For example, at Kansas State University, they offer a degree in bakery science. Bakery science. At Kent State, you can get a master's degree in comedy. George Mason offers a bachelor's degree in tourism and events management. Plymouth State University offers a degree in adventure education where students can study things like rock climbing and canoe paddling fundamentals, wilderness expedition, and whitewater kayaking. The University of Washington and Penn State, they both offer degrees in astrobiology, where you can learn about the possibility of life on other planets, which we haven't found, by the way. This one is great. Carnegie Mellon University offers a degree in bagpiping. Florida Southern offers a degree in citrus farming. DePaul University in Chicago has a costume engineering major where you can study to become a costume designer or a wardrobe assistant. We used to just call those seamstresses, and you learned it from your mother. Now you can get a degree in it to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars a year. The University of New Hampshire offers a degree in eco-gastronomy where you can learn about sustainable and organic food production. If you wanted to get a degree in puppet arts, the University of Connecticut is the place for you. They have one. Sophia University, which is an accredited university in Palo Alto, California, for which you can apply for federal financial aid, has an Institute of Transpersonal Spiritual Psychology offering master's degrees in transpersonal psychology, women's spirituality, and spiritual guidance. And as I'm reading that, I am choking on the stench of incense and failure. The University of Maryland is one of multiple 2- and 4-year colleges that offer degrees in thanatology. What is thanatology, you might ask? It is the study of death. Not medicine, just death, which is what we're all going to want to do after watching our society completely implode on itself from the sheer weight of all of this stupidity. Those are some of the ridiculous degrees that you can actually take out tens of thousands of dollars in federal financial aid and loans to get. And look, I get most people with student loan debt do not have the most ridiculous of degrees. Most are not standing there with their framed certificate in bagpiping or death or wooden boat building, which apparently you can get at the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building in Washington State. But even the less idiotic and useless degrees here, teaching degrees. For instance, we all need teachers. We need good teachers. We need more good teachers. That is a worthwhile and honorable profession. We need good teachers. I'm all for paying good teachers more money, which frankly we would be able to do if we didn't have, 78 layers of unnecessary bloated government and overpaid bureaucrats that suck up all of the funding. But I can't tell you how many people I personally know who intentionally chose to go to 4-year universities, including private schools, and took out tens of thousands of dollars in student loans for a degree in a career field that, hey, unless you're planning to pursue even more degrees to work your way up the academic ladder, you know full well you're going to land a job paying you in the ballpark of about $50,000 to $60,000 a year. If you live in a place like New York, maybe you'll make more, but your cost of living is higher. It makes no sense to take out that kind of money for a degree that you know at the start is going to land you a mediocre paying job at best. Get a 2-year degree from a community or a junior college, transfer to a reasonably priced school that you can afford that will require minimal or no student loans, get your bachelor's, and then you won't be saddled with $2,500 a month in student loan payments or whatever right out of the gate with a paycheck that can't cover that. This is basic stuff. People want to make this out to be so incredibly complicated to avoid any culpability in the mess that they've made. This is not complicated. This is basic financial management here. And by the way, all of this idea that you deserve something for nothing, this idea that, Democrats are so compassionate toward your financial problems that you're just some perpetual victim who is always being held down by the evil, greedy, capitalist Republican pigs simply because you're required to make payments that you voluntarily signed up for. That whole bill of goods is being sold to you by a bunch of raging hypocrites who could not care less about you other than how much money they can raise off of you for their next political campaign where they promise you everything under the sun. For example, AOC and her fellow socialist Bernie Sanders are catching all kinds of flack right now. Get this one. For jet setting across the country in this ridiculously expensive private plane, decrying the dangers of climate change and the evils of capitalism. Same people who care so much about the environment and all of these poor people suffering under student loan debt are flying around on one of the most expensive private jets you can buy, which is pretty much the very definition of irony. So AOC was filmed exiting the side of a private jet that she's been sharing with her 83-year-old compatriot here in the Senate. They've been on their Fighting Oligarchy tour, which has made stopovers in a whole slew of left-wing cities, and even Coachella, which is the annual music festival that's held out in the California desert that has ticket prices upwards of $1,500 and where you can easily drop $100 on tacos that don't even fill you up like this guy did here. So Bernie Sanders, who's a millionaire career politician who owns 3 houses, to remind, took to the stage at Coachella to rant about rich people. And meanwhile, here's how much he's shucking out for his personal air travel. So the San Joaquin Valley Sun estimates that the Bombardier Challenger, which is the plane that he and AOC have been jet setting around on, costs about $15,000 per hour. That's based on a description on Ventura Air Services Company's website, the people that own the plane. The outlet also cited flight records that show AOC and Bernie Sanders traveled to Salt Lake City, Boise, Bakersfield, and Sacramento last week alone. And this is where AOC and Bernie Sanders blasted Republicans for rewarding the wealthy and rewarding millionaires and billionaires and ignoring the impending apocalypse thanks to global warming right before they got back on their multi-million-dollar jet and gas-powered it to the next Democrat stronghold where they promised people that they would solve all of their problems because we need to eat the rich, right? So while AOC only stepped up from bartending to screeching on the House floor in the past years or so, by the way, Bernie Sanders has been famous for this for decades. His campaign committee, the Friends of Bernie Sanders, spent over $221,000 on private jets during the first quarter of 2025 alone. This is according to the Federal Election Commission filings. He also spent over $1.9 million on private jet travel during his failed presidential campaign in 2020. This is the norm for him. This is what happens when you are a career politician who doesn't actually care about poor people other than the fact that you can get them to vote for you and give you gobs of cash for you to jet set around on a private plane while promising to fix all of their problems that you have no real good solutions for. This is campaign cash, by the way. This is PAC money. It's not like this is tax dollars, but it is money that is raised in part from all of the poor, beleaguered hippies who are either dumb enough or ignorant enough to think that Bernie Sanders gives the furry end of a rat's behind about them or their lives or their student loan bills. No, he does not. Not one iota. Nor do they care about the fact that this country is drowning in debt and that we have saddled future generations with debt before they were even conceived. The fact that once again the government takeover of the sector of the free market, like student loans, has resulted in abject disaster. They do not care because as long as they get to jet set around in luxury airliners and go to swanky dinners and music festivals, they are happy to promise you the moon and the stars and to fix all of your problems while wrecking the nation in the process and ultimately fixing nothing for you or for anyone else. Pay back your student loans. Figure it out. Put on your big boy pants. Grow up and be an adult. Because if we have a country full of weak-willed sissies who demand everything for free or who don't want to face challenges and overcome obstacles in their life, we are sunk. And with that, that's the Brittany Hughes Show for today. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you guys back here next Thursday. In the meantime, head over to Apple Podcasts, hit the subscribe button on the Brittany Hughes Show. That way you won't ever miss an episode. You can also subscribe to the Newsbusters podcast with Tim Graham on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I'll see you guys back here next Thursday. In the meantime, have a fantastic weekend and a blessed week ahead.